Welcome to Maritime Matters, a podcast focused on leaders in the maritime market, the people, the companies, the technologies that are making and breaking the news, helping to lead the maritime industry to a safer, more efficient, more profitable, and cleaner future. Welcome aboard. This is Greg Troutwine with Maritime Matters, the Marine Link podcast, and we're very pleased to be joined today by a trio of executives: Paul Barrett, the Chief Communications Officer for Davie Defense; Wilhelm Roberts, Almaco; and Philip Lewis, the Director of Research for Intellitus, to discuss one of the most exciting projects in recent U.S. maritime history, the quest to rebuild the U.S. Coast Guard Icebreaker fleet. Paul, I'm gonna start with you, and we'll dive into the project to rebuild the U.S. Coast Guard Icebreaker fleet shortly. But before that, can you discuss in the round Davie's cumulative experience and current order book in the design and construction of icebreakers?
Yeah, it's pretty unique, and as a group, and our group is the Enosha Group, which is UK based and has operations in Canada, the US, and of course Finland. And through our business, Helsinki Shipyard, we've built well over 60 polar icebreakers, and that's over the last, I guess, 70 plus years. And that's really where you could talk about the modern icebreaker as we see it today. So we've built 60 there. We've built probably close to 10 or 15 of those ships at our Canadian shipyard. And obviously in Texas, that's something that we're going to be building in the future. And right now we have a really extensive order book. So we have 5 ships we're building for the American Coast Guard. We have 7 ships that we're going to be building for the Canadian Coast Guard, all medium to heavy icebreakers. And then we have a range of other ships, obviously, that we're working on, which we can talk about whenever you'd like.
And hey, while I have you on the hot seat, why don't you just talk about the cumulative order book? Because obviously we're here to talk about icebreakers, but if you can give some background on the current order book outside of icebreakers, that would be helpful as well.
Well, there are some things I can and some things I can't actually talk about in terms of what our order book is going to be. But what I can say in terms of current open projects, we also are working extensively on the City class frigates in terms of vessel life extensions for the Canadian warships. So we've been doing that for the past several years, and we'll continue to do that. We also have a range of other projects, including ones that are looking more into the commercial passenger and even luxury passenger area, and that includes things like expedition cruise ships and a range of others. So from that perspective, we do have a pretty extensive order book across the board. However, we obviously are really at our core building icebreakers in very large numbers with high expertise for some of the biggest and most important programs in the world.
Wilhelm, I'd like to move to you just for a moment, because when we met in your office in Florida earlier this year, this was a real eye-opener for me, because even after covering this market for 30 plus years, it's impossible to have deep insights on all suppliers and contractors, but I was particularly struck by the depth and breadth of your offer to the maritime market, particularly in regards to Almaco's full turnkey project management and engineering, procurement, and contracting capabilities. Very long-winded intro to a simple question, but can you recount for our audience how Almaco first became involved with Davie? Specifically, I'm talking about those auxiliary oiler contracts.
Sure. Well, thank you for that long introduction about Almaco. That was great. Couldn't have done it better myself. We are, let's say, we are a company which have been involved in the hotel side of cruise ships forever. We grew up with the cruise business basically, and then we moved on to the offshore side, and all the products you have seen, which includes galleys, provision storerooms, refrigeration, provision stores, I said already, cabins, public spaces and stuff. That's a part of the hotel side of a ship. So from the cruise business and those extensive modernizations that we did we started with basically, we moved on to offshore, and there we were more focusing on complete superstructures, complete living quarters. And I guess that's how we, got known to Davie. And I must say that we should actually have started with discussing if you are referring to the combat support vessel Asterix, what kind of brilliant idea Davie came up with. And it was basically taking a container ship, stripping it off, everything, and building it into auxiliary oiler. And of course, a big part of that conversion was the superstructure. So we were then asked, with our know-how in the complete interior background works, ventilation, what have you, to take a look at the concept. And we started very early together to look at, how this can be built, maybe in dual locations. And that's what we ended doing. We took care of, we got the conceptual ideas and design from Davie, from Chantier Davie in Quebec. And then we developed the whole concept from design to delivery. And we then actually ended up building it in Finland. That was the first project. And then we kind of towed it over on a barge and integrated into the hull. So it was a very exciting project, and it was done to budget and at schedule. So we are very proud of that. And that's basically the whole story. And it took us 18 months from basically design to delivery. So I think both parties are pretty proud of this project and started up something new. Typical Davie innovation, I would say, that taking a concept and making it happen.
But look, I just wanted to add, because I think in a sort of typical Finnish fashion, Wilhelm's being pretty modest about that project with the Asterix, to have a superstructure and then obviously the hull developed in two different locations and then shipped across the Atlantic, and then having absolutely no issue with then placing the superstructure onto the hull is a pretty amazing feat. And I think the Asterix is also important because it's a concept that we also call ship as a service. So what that means is that not only did we build the ship for the Canadian Navy, what we also do is we provide the service, which is crewing and operations, and we do that on a service level agreement, which is on a long-term lease and has been, I guess, for almost 10 years now, and has served really in an exemplary fashion across all theatres of operation in the world. And that includes not just the Canadian Navy, but I think it's something like 50 or 60 navies around the world in major areas of conflict, as well as providing humanitarian assistance and what have you. So I really believe that what Wilhelm is talking about is one of the most important things in our company's 200-year history.
What I was going to ask Wilhelm there, you and also the comment Paul made. Having these modules built in one location and then fitted without problems in another location, obviously that's a real challenge in shipbuilding. So in terms of the technology, how are you working with from the 3D models, from the point clouds, geostation point of view, to get the dimensions correct, so pretty much everything fits together with minimum rework? Because at the end of the day, whether it's that particular vessel or one of the icebreakers, you're going to want to manage that rework.
I think Paul, if you don't mind, first of all, I think we should remember that, especially in Northern Europe, it's quite common that grand blocks are produced in several locations and put together on the main shipyard in order to gain some capacities. So this is done more and more. You see it in Finland, you see it in other countries in Northern Europe as well. What are we doing? Well, we have 3D modeling. We have the same systems we are using. It's based on Aviva. It's the same as what we are doing now on Polar Max, for example. And but then, of course, taking measurements is still important, before things are delivered and when they arrive to the sites. And there are always tolerances that can be worked with. So, but it's very important as you take up to have the common tools and common standards. By the way, you have to work with the same standards. So I guess those are the keys to success.
And are you doing that through 3D point clouds, building those models that then you share with
Yes,
the Davie main model?
absolutely. We have the same
Okay,
systems
thank you.
basically that are connected to each other.
Wilhelm, I'd like to stick with you for a moment, if you don't mind. And I was just wondering if you could discuss in detail Almaco's experience in regards to the construction and delivery of Polar Max icebreakers,
Hmm.
including how your two teams will work together on the new U.S. Arctic security cutters.
Hmm. Hmm. Yes, thank you for the question. First of all, we talked already about Davie and Levi before, and this happens to be the same location, one of Davie's locations. And we are in 8 places around the world. When we started the Asterix project, we were not really fully established in Quebec. And we realized that this is going to be the opening of something new. We saw what Davie was doing. We were very, very impressed with that. And we decided to invest in Quebec. So what we did was we started, opening up a company there, manning it slowly but surely, and then we also we're working very hard on local sourcing. We knew that that will be a requirement sooner or later, so we were really working on finding the subcontractors, finding the suppliers, and of course, in the same time, talking to Chantier Davie. And we were looking together at different kind of building strategies very early on and came up with different models that could work. And because we were not 100% sure about, steel building capacity and things like that, it ended up being a project where the shipyard is building the complete steel of the superstructure, and we are orchestrating everything on the inside of the superstructure. So all the interiors, whatever you have on the inside of the superstructure, we are in charge of. And we work together with our own teams, of course, supervisors, local subcontractors, local suppliers, but also the shipyard workers. So we have a very kind of clear demarcation list who is doing what, actually. But we are in charge of getting that superstructure done. So I guess that tells you a little bit about how we got into it and what we are doing for the time being. And we are in the same time, by the way, we are also taking care of the lower decks in Helsinki. And, both locations are known to us. We have been working with Helsinki shipyard since the 90s, basically, on different kind of vessels that they have been building. So that might be a benefit for us that we do the lower decks there and we do the upper decks or the superstructure in Quebec. And then we are in charge of the integration as well. And your second question was about the Arctic security cutters. We are in a very early process there, and I have to be very open and say that, we haven't been, concluding any contracts yet, but of course we are the same way in the US and Finland we are already, but in the US we are strengthening our positions in Texas. We have just opened up an office there as well in actually League City, which is very close to, in between Galveston and Houston, as we are as well in the oil and gas business. So it's strategically a good place to be. But this is very early in the process, so I can't comment more on that for the time being.
Before we dig into the actual topic that we're here to talk about, which is the U.S. Arctic security cutters, I'd like for you to set the stage because, frankly, I know that you and your team at Intellitus earlier this year completed a report on the global icebreaker fleet. Can you give some highlights of the report? And again, I'm just looking for insights on who dominates world icebreakers in terms of design, construction, owning, and operating, and where does the U.S. rank today in that regard?
No, thanks, Greg, for that. We've obviously got one of the leaders of icebreakers in the room today, so they'll obviously be up there as one of the major players. But the report we did really was looking at the bigger icebreakers, so the category A icebreakers, the polar class 105s, and the category B icebreakers, sort of 6 to 7s, more for the Baltics. So if we look at those big polar category A icebreakers, Russia's obviously got the largest fleet, and I'd say Helsinki shipyards obviously contributed substantially over time to the building of that fleet. Although since sanctions are in place, the Russians are building their own capabilities. Canada would have the second of those largest fleets, and if you look at the Canadians and the Russians, one of the one of the things we noticed with the icebreaking market, it's certainly an increasingly important geopolitical security and even commercial subject, and particularly with Canada and Russia, where you have the Northwest Passage, not so much used on commercial traffic at the moment. There is some, but not a huge amount, and the Northern Sea route in Russia, which is increasingly used for commercial traffic, and certainly Asian nations would like to be using it more. And the potential future transpolar route, which the Chinese are very interested in because it doesn't really go through anybody's national waters, and that's driving the thrust of Chinese nuclear icebreaker program. The US at the moment in the category A's is a distant third because it really hasn't, it hadn't maintained a big active icebreaker presence, but obviously the Arctic Security kind of program brings the US back into play. And then we have, China as a growing entrant and a range of other players getting smaller and smaller that will either be in the Arctic or in the Antarctic with the Antarctic research vessels. When you get to the category B, and that's more where that Baltic icebreaker comes in with the Finnish, the Russians, the Canadians, obviously, the Swedes, Estonia, Latvia. Those are the sort of markets where you see those. But there's a market with a lot of aging icebreakers, and where procurement is, we would argue, required. The Swedish have obviously gone to the market unpopularly with a Korean-built icebreaker rather than an icebreaker built in Baltic yards, but we would expect further procurement from Baltic countries over the coming years. So it's in the big scheme of shipping, it's not a massive segment, but these big icebreakers are very high capital value, have a lot of very high value equipment in them. They're long projects, long man hours. And they're amongst some of the most powerful ships. Obviously, the Russians have their nuclear icebreakers, which are particularly powerful. People would say, well, with global warming, we'll see less icebreakers. Well, actually, with global warming, the ice sheets are breaking up and you're getting more ice coming around, which creates more of a challenge for icebreaking. So it's actually driving icebreaking. And even in these global warming times, in the Gulf of Bothnia this year, it was one of the coldest winters of recent record, to the extent that the Russians repositioned one of their nuclear icebreakers for the first time into the Baltic because the ice conditions required such a powerful icebreaker. So we can't say global warming equals a reducing market. It's not a reducing market. It's a growing market. It's geopolitical, it's security, it's commercial, and that gives great opportunities for people within the supply chain.
Ionoscia Group is an international marine, defense, and industrial group with shipbuilding operations across Canada, Finland, and the United States. Its portfolio includes Davie in Quebec, Canada's largest shipbuilder, Helsinki Shipyard, a global leader in icebreaker and ice-class vessels, and Davie Defense, its U.S. shipbuilding arm based at Gulf Copper Shipyards in Galveston and Port Arthur, Texas. Together, they combine decades of complex shipbuilding expertise to design, build, and maintain mission-critical vessels. Notably, the group is now at the center of major Arctic programs. Davie is building Canada's flagship Polar Max icebreaker, while Davie Defense has a U.S. Coast Guard contract for 5 Arctic security cutters with Helsinki shipyards supporting the program. Gentlemen, let's dig into the topic that our audience is most interested to hear about, and that's the recently finalized $3.5 billion contract to build U.S. Arctic security cutters. 2 to be built at Davie Defense affiliate Helsinki Shipyard in Finland, and 3 at the company's Gulf Copper facilities in Galveston and Port Arthur, Texas. Paul, if you could take the lead here, just discuss what is the current project status and timeline.
The project is going incredibly well thus far. We are going to be cutting steel in Pori in Finland on June 23rd. We expect to cut steel on ship 2 soon after that. And we are now in the process of starting the upgrades to the Gulf Copper and Port Arthur shipyards. And our aim is to deliver ship 1 in 2028 and to begin ship 3 in 2028 to cut steel on ship 3 in 2028 in Texas, with all ships scheduled to be delivered by 2035 is the current schedule. So it's going very well.
I'd like to better understand to what extent the Canadian Polar Max and program icebreakers and the U.S. Arctic security cutter designs are off the shelf. And I really ask this in the context because government procurement are notorious for funding released in stages and the client making changes that take the final design far away from the original design. And generally, I think everyone in this call knows how that goes.
Well, off the shelf maybe suggests that they're designs we just have hanging around, and I think they're a lot more than that. But what I can do is I can take them, one ship at a time. Polar Max fundamentally is you could talk about it being a go anywhere icebreaker, definitely category A, and it's Polar Class 2. And when delivered to Canada in 2030. It will be the most capable and powerful icebreaker ever delivered to a Western government. And what it will be is it will be genuinely competitive with the Russian fleet and obviously particularly the non-nuclear fleet. So for us, when we acquired Helsinki Shipyard in 2023, late 2023, what became Polar Max was already a mature design, and it was originally an overpowered mining support ship for Norris Nickel, the mining company you may be aware of. We spent a lot of time and a lot of money working with the Canadian Coast Guard to ensure that met pretty much 100% of all their operational requirements. And the ship, as we've talked about before, is now being built between Finland and Canada quite uniquely under a fixed price and fixed schedule contract, which largely addresses the issues you've described. It's not done on a time and materials basis. So the Arctic security cutters, once again, are our original design and intellectual property. And we refer to that as, in our design house, as the MPPS 100, so multi-purpose polar supply vessel originally. And the first Polar Class 3 ship, which will deliver to the US Coast Guard, as I said, in 2028, will be the 8th ship and the 4th generation of the original design. And collectively, I understand that those ships have served close to 90 Arctic winters. And again, the ASCs will be delivered under fixed terms. So it's quite a different government contracting process than we've had in previous iterations. With the program icebreakers for the Canadian Coast Guard, they're going to be Polar Class 3 again, and they're going to be the workhorses of this kind of medium to medium heavy fleet, modern, efficient, multi-mission, and reflecting the Coast Guard's kind of evolving role. And we're obviously working closely with the Coast Guard and the Government of Canada to advance the next phases of that contract and obviously move, hopefully very efficiently, towards construction and delivery of those ships. But with that, we're expecting an announcement very soon, and you need to stay tuned in terms of how that is going to roll out. But we're very excited to have 3 projects for major ice-breaking programs running concurrently.
No, I was just going to say that it really makes sense when you have some time to discuss about general arrangements, the technical specifications, all equipment lists, whatsoever, and then you agree with the customer. You have a fixed schedule, you have a fixed price, budget, and you deliver on time. I mean, it sounds pretty efficient to me.
Within the national shipbuilding strategy in Canada, they've obviously been there for quite some time, but the status has been budget under development. Is that and with no real specific dates into the 2030s when they're delivered? Are there any sort of public statements now when these program icebreakers are actually expected to be delivered?
Nothing definitive and current is what I would say, and obviously into the 2030s and 2040s is the current schedule. However, as I said, we probably need to speak again fairly soon, because we are expecting announcements which are going to hopefully firm up exactly when the projects are going to begin and when first ships will be delivered. But at this stage, I can't give you any more details. But
and can I ask? I mean, there's something with the Canadian program. We've seen the Polar Max go to a very high power output and as a conventional icebreaker, an incredibly powerful icebreaker. But with this increasing focus on the sort of high north and moves around that transpolar route where we have some of the thickest ice conditions, have you seen any interest in, for instance, from Canada or even the US in increasing those power outputs and even looking at the nuclear option in the same way that the Russians are and increasingly the Chinese are looking to develop?
Well, there's nothing definitive, but there are lots of conversations. What I would say across both, if you look at the 3 ice pack nations of Finland, the US and Canada, there are a lot of discussions about how can we play catch up with our competitors and adversaries in a highly contested Arctic where, the whole world now is looking to take a position. And when it comes to what do we need in terms of the tool set to address those competitors and those adversaries, well, at the moment, there's nothing definitive on nuclear, but it's not to say that couldn't be something that could be brought to the fore and discussed seriously when we go forward. But at this stage, it's not something that I could say, well, there's a definitive plan to do that. That said, when you look at things like the Polar Max, the other polar icebreaker that's being built for Canada, and also the Polar Security Cutter, which is being developed for the Americans, those ships are going to be genuinely competitive with even some of the nuclear powered icebreakers in terms of the one, not I'm talking about the latest iteration that Russia's looking for, a kind of off the charts in terms of power and what have you. But in terms of what is there today, those ships coming out of the West over the next 10 plus years are going to be genuinely competitive. And let's see where we go with the debate around nuclear in various forms. But at this stage, nothing definitive.
Gentlemen, if we can move on to the contract again, I'd like to discuss how the work is going to be managed internally. And I guess the question is there a single project management and procurement team, or is this split between sites and units? And I guess bigger picture, what do you see as the primary challenges to keeping this project and these geographically disparate teams working in unison for an efficient, effective project execution?
So of course we have teams in both. If you look at Polar Max, for example, we have great teams in both, but it's an integrated program, and we are executing across multiple sites. We have amazing program managers who are overseeing this. And what we're doing is, showing that you can do something in a unique way. And if you look at it, I think Wilhelm mentioned it earlier, is the Baltic method, so to speak, is actually that you're used to doing things in that kind of distributed build mode. And what we're doing is we're kind of rippling that out across two different continents. And what we're finding is that actually this is working extremely well. So if you think of Helsinki Shipyard being from a design and construction expertise, they are world class and in our view, the world's best. SATA, which originally was in the offshore business, has incredible specialized capability in fabrication, particularly when it comes to complex and very thick steel. So they're doing an incredible job of bringing in this unique kind of steel that's required to go into the blocks that we're producing for the Polar Max. And obviously the other thing is how can we make sure that we can bring together people across the geographies, time zones, regulatory environments, supplier bases, and obviously cultures, right? And that means that, communication and execution have had to be taken to a completely different level. But we believe, and what's being proven now is our model is working to bring the best in Polish shipbuilding together and to build something which ultimately is going to be delivered much quicker than the original schedule, and that's going to be in 2030.
One thing, of course, is if you are talking about security cutters, where you have the two first ships being built in Finland and the other three in Galveston, and you have different teams working together, communication is extremely important. Standards are the same, the design is the same. That's extremely important. And of course, when you have started in one location and you can integrate the teams from the other location in everything from project meetings to lessons learned, there is a lot of things to gain by producing the ships in a series, even if you are in different locations.
Can you discuss in detail the upgrades that Davie Gulf Copper has undergone or will undergo since being acquired? And what is the scope of works that will be undertaken for the ASC at the yard? And will that be carried out into Canada?
It's actually going to be extremely extensive. So we're at the start, and we had a very enjoyable, successful groundbreaking ceremony just last week. That was on June the 1st. And, that really heralded what's going to be happening, which is going to be essentially bringing back complex shipbuilding to the Gulf Coast in a big way and for the first time in many decades, actually. So we're extremely excited by that. And obviously what we want to do with Gulf Copper is to accomplish a couple of goals. And we want to drive more efficiency into the shipbuilding processes while providing an environment for our people that, is really about a 21st century efficient shipbuilding environment. And we're going to be building new office spaces, huge fabrication halls, supporting workshops, a major logistics center, as well as other kind of assembly and related facilities, and all with new equipment. And you know what I think is really important to say here is that our folks, we have, I think now we started with 350 when we bought, we've now around 600 across the two sites. And one of the things that's really important to mention is Huntington Ingalls have been, we've been subcontracting to them for quite some time now on the Arleigh Burkes and on the block fabrication. They came back to us recently and said at the CS Base Show and said, you are doing some of the best work at Gulf Copper on those projects, which we were so happy to see. And what we wanted to really think about then is that if we're able to give those people a modern set of tools which is it's quite an antiquated set of tools at the moment. If you look at Gulf Copper, we believe that the extent of what they can achieve is pretty limitless. So we're incredibly excited. We already have a great workforce, and soon enough we're going to have an awesome set of tools, a modern 21st century shipbuilding hub, which is really going to bring, as I said, shipbuilding at a complex level back to Texas in a really big way. So we're incredibly excited. The other thing I'd say really quickly is, we are going to be building a durable Texan and American shipbuilding workforce. And that's actually going to include about 2,400 American jobs directly. And we also believe, and this is an independent economic analysis, that we could actually bring in 7,000 people in the wider supply chain, subcontractors and everything else. And of course, you also know that we're going to be generating opportunities for suppliers, workforce training programs. We've got an apprenticeship scheme. We've also starting a minor shipbuilding program with Texas A&M, which is just down the road from us. And obviously continued long-term investment in maritime infrastructure. So it's an incredibly positive story, and we can't wait to get to work. And Pearson out of Florida are helping us with the operations on this.
Paul, can I just ask you on that point about the manpower? It's obviously at the moment there's a lot of excitement around US shipbuilding with the programs that are there to build more and more vessels. But one of the things that comes up quite frequently in certainly in government procurement contract reviews is the challenge at the moment that shipyards are facing with recruiting and retaining labour. And obviously that's led to the subcontracting from the Navy primes to the commercial shipyards. Are you seeing that there's, and I know that's not your particular area of expertise, but obviously it's a very important thing to be able to promote local workforce development and bring local people in. But given that it seems to be such a competitive environment, are you facing challenges, or is this something that's actually,
Yes.
Is it being able to deliver as maybe as
it's a great question. It's a great question. But what I'd say is one of the reasons we did a fairly extensive search around the US for various sites. We were in a competitive process, and Texas won out in the end. And the reason we chose Gulf Copper was essentially we've got a kind of open book. We also have a workforce which is young. We also have many adjacent industries, be that the petrochemicals, be that heavy construction, be that industrial engineering and fabrication in different areas. And we're seeing already, and we also, by the way, we have Texas A&M with amazing programs that we're already tapping into. So what we've seen so far is in short order, we've been able to really bring both young, skilled folks, as well as things like naval architects and engineers into our business quite quickly, because we're not, the rest of the Gulf Coast is actually much more conflated, and we're sitting apart, and we believe that it's easier for us, given what we know about the workforce in our area, to actually upscale to that 2,500 and more. So it's of course a challenge, but it's a challenge after our analysis that we believe we can meet head on.
Almaco Group is a global EPC supplier specializing in the complete design, engineering, construction, and modernization of accommodation and catering solutions for the marine and offshore industries. Operating with a strong local presence across 9 countries, including the United States, Canada, France, Italy, and Germany, the company integrates closely with regional supply chains and domestic workforces. Its extensive portfolio covers full living, passenger, and working environments and superstructures for complex vessels and offshore units, including cabins, public spaces, galleys, provision stores, laundries, and refrigeration machinery. Combined with complete lifecycle services and turnkey project management, Almaco partners directly with local shipyards and owners to deliver tailored marine interiors with a strict focus on quality, safety, and reliability. And again, I know this is still relatively new, but can we discuss in greater detail the suppliers and the subcontractors, the key partners involved in the program to date and their role? And are the partners from the Polar Max program essentially the same for the ASC program?
Yeah, I mean, I have to be actually extremely careful here because I'm not sure in its entirety what's been announced and what hasn't. So there are definitely similarities between some of the long lead items, and I can tell you I can't confirm with the ASC program that all of those suppliers. What I can say is obviously with Polarmax, we have Almaco, but we also have ABB announced in terms of the Azimuth pods and others. So from that perspective, yes, there are some similarities, and but that said, there are also going to be significant Canadian and American suppliers involved as well, and it's a tricky one. And I don't mean to kind of be evasive on that one, but it's really difficult for me to sort of name names other than those that have already been announced, and that's kind of where I have to leave it at this stage. But we're expecting again to announce a lot very very soon.
Paul, I'll ask you this because I just want to make sure I'm not asking a second question that's the same. The next question was discussing the work scope for the icebreakers and other projects coordinated between Helsinki and SATA. Is that a fair question or has it been adequately covered?
I think it's been covered, but obviously Helsinki Shipyard and SATA are entirely complementary. Helsinki is leading complex icebreaker design, integration, and then we work with others who are doing the outfitting and obviously delivering the ship. And SATA adds this, incredible production capacity and through the steel fabrication and obviously the block fabrication construction, which is going great guns. And we're so pleased with what they're being able to produce at the moment. But together they give us, I guess, more of a complete value chain solution. And I know Wilhelm talks about turnkey. From our perspective, we're moving. Our aspiration is to move into turnkey for that part of the production, and then working obviously with Wilhelm and others on other parts of this. And what we can say is having them and having it all in Finland and having it all under our ownership means that we're able to reduce any bottlenecks and deliver more projects simultaneously without in any way compromising our quality. So I would say, and Wilhelm I think would know more about this than I do, but it's really a modern shipbuilding model that we're leveraging here, and we're so pleased that we have two incredible sites that can help us to do that.
Can't have a conversation in maritime today without talking about greenhouse gas emissions, fuel efficiency. So, in these days of energy efficiency and emission reductions outside of battery and energy storage systems, what steps have been taken, will be taken with ASC, Polar Max, and program icebreakers to be more fuel efficient and to reduce emissions?
Great, I can start that as well. Look, across all of our programs, obviously, there are some sort of regulatory requirements, but also our purpose in this is to focus on with the icebreakers, it's efficient hull and propulsion design. It's the most modern engines, smart power management, and ensuring the vessels are operated in a way that sort of matches what they need in terms of power to the mission requirement, and whether that's breaking ice or a range of other things like supporting science projects, conducting search and rescue, etc., etc. I guess one of the things I'd say we are working with across many jurisdictions with academic institutions, research institutions on the future of fuel, and we've got several projects that we hope to have good conclusions on in the near future. What I would add though is if you think of a major sort of medium or heavy icebreaker going, particularly in the Arctic, going into some of the most inhospitable places on the planet, there's very little infrastructure in a lot of these places. And what I would say is I've looked at an analysis recently from our Finnish colleagues, which said, well, look, if you actually say you wanted to have a fully electric, medium to heavy icebreaker, and that was traveling at half speed, when would you need to refuel that? And the analysis I saw was you need to refuel it after half a day. So until such time as we can have multiple days and weeks of the ability for the ship to actually go into the Arctic, then we're not going to be going fully to alternative fuels. We talked about nuclear a little bit earlier, but at the moment, biodiesel is allowing us to have, the same ship would be up there without having to refuel for 50 days or somewhere around that. So we just need to have, we need to support market ready as opposed to sort of moonshot solutions. But the whole environmental piece and sustainability piece and efficiency piece is uppermost in our thinking at all times.
With that, are you finding that there is a requirement to collect the waste heat increasingly from the accommodation areas, from the machinery spaces, to recycle that waste heat into energy? Is that something that's coming on? I don't know if that's something that Wilhelm's involved in, or that's something that comes in the overall vessel design.
Yeah, I mean that's something that absolutely is looked into, and I was going to say also that what Paul said earlier with hull design, and then you have propulsion, and of course there's a lot of technologies that has also been taken from the other ship segments where they have been developed and where maybe much more energy is actually spent. So we also, the same way for us when it comes to the food handling equipment, for example, we are forced to look into low emissions, low energy, galley energy management, for example, on cruise ships is very important because it's the third biggest consumer of energy on board. So of course we try to utilize this type of technology that we have already developed for the other segments. That's my point. Same thing, by the way, when it comes to waste management, the cruise ships are also, there are very, very strict requirements, for example, for going to Alaska. And I'm sure that similar concepts are looked at for the icebreakers as well.
Excellent point, Wilhelm, and greatly appreciated. So, gentlemen, again, I very much appreciate your time. Just one more question, and I think I've almost kept us on time here. Obviously the USASC is the primary focus of this conversation, but in reality, the icebreaker shipbuilding and supply market is evolving as we speak. So the question being, with the current loss of the traditional Russian icebreaking market, does IcePact effectively fill that hole? And I guess more importantly, looking forward, as sanctions have forced the Russian supply chain to evolve, how much of a threat do you see from the Russian supply chain in the international market once future peace is achieved?
Um, it's a hot market at the moment with icebreakers, right? And I know Philip did his analysis recently. I've seen other analyses where, if you think of order books, I'm talking about ex China and Russia. I've seen order books for the range of icebreakers in the 80 ship range. Whether that's entirely true, and those are ones that are already locked in, and obviously demand over the next 10 years or so. And that could be anything from, I guess, we talked about the expedition vessels as well as obviously complex high polar class ships as well. So I think in that sense, yeah, absolutely. Given where we are, given the Arctic focus, the Ice Pact coming together as a sort of a trilateral enabler of that. And one of the things that the Ice Pact does, which is really important, is it kind of promotes the fact that countries can build these things for their allies, right? So in that sense, I think it does absolutely. And we've got a very full order book, as I explained earlier, and other ships potentially coming, which we'll announce soon enough. I guess what I would say about the Russians, and I'm not a complete expert in terms of where they are with their supply chain, but I have heard that they are, encountering challenges, not being able to use the Finnish supply chain and the international supply chain to build and supply and fit out their ships. So I think in that sense, I have much more confidence in the capability of the Finns in this context than I do in terms of where the Russians are. That said, I'm not an expert in that, and I wonder if Wilhelm may have a more learned response than I have.
No, I think that response was pretty good, actually. And the other thing, I mean, your question, Greg, was also about, that there is a gap now when the Russians are not building or buying icebreakers from Finland. And if the Ice Pact will fill up that gap, it looks like there is, what we have heard earlier, there is a lot in the pipeline. But we shouldn't forget also that Helsinki shipyard, if you are particularly looking at Helsinki shipyard, is a great shipyard for cruise ships. They have a long experience and a long reference list. And today, with the situation in the cruise business, in the cruise building world, you can see that most of the shipyards are actually pretty busy. And there are more ships to be built. So I think that they're in a good position in Helsinki.
Gentlemen, asking anyone for an hour these days is a lot. I genuinely appreciate your time. There's a lot to talk about. I'm sure we'll be following this up individually or as a group again. But again, best of luck. And I look forward, Wilhelm, to visiting Link City. Paul, please go ahead.
Absolutely.
I want to make one more point that I forgot earlier.
Oh, absolutely. Please do.
Other things that we're doing, and we talked about Wilhelm made me remember this, so thank you. It was obviously cruise is something, passenger, which is something we're looking into, but also we just signed a deal to bring autonomous vehicle production, and I'm talking about boats, with a company called Kraken Technologies, and we are looking to find the production capability for those boats and also the systems to be obviously integrated with conventional vessels. So that's something that's really important for us. Is that actually we're not standing still. What we're believing is there is a future which will see both the uncrewed and conventional vessels working in perfect unison. And to be honest, they already are. If you look at what's happening in places like the Strait of Hormuz and elsewhere. So this is something that's really exciting to us. And we would love to come and speak to you about that more in the near future.
Thank you for listening to Maritime Matters. If you would like to be featured on a future Maritime Matters podcast, visit www.marinelink.com or email maritimematters@marinelink.com.